going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 live stream for the Bermuda Championship. Going to get you guys ready for all your exposure tomorrow. But first off, a breakdown of the DFS side of what we're doing with our Draftkings lineups. Next, we'll go into the prop and the betting side with some underdog and prize picks exposure that I'm getting to for Friday as well. And that'll be for PGA and for the DP World Tour. So by the end, you'll have a complete game plan for everything that you're going with on Friday. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing going. But hopefully everyone's having a fantastic week so far. We've got a few of our core plays and values towards the top end of the leaderboard, so can't complain about that so far. And also, if you guys tailed that prop slip that we had for round number 1, we cashed out on that as well, so profit on that side. Overall in a good spot heading into Friday. Let's see what we can build on that going into the weekend. And I was also playing some golf myself today. I had 2 near aces on the golf course, both with my lucky little 7-iron, so maybe that's a sign of things to come tomorrow. Maybe it's a GPP takedown for us out there. But let's start off with a look at the averages from round number 1, which were heavily skewed towards the PM side. In fact, I was not expecting this at all. Full sale ahead of time. It was nearly a 3-stroke difference between the morning and the afternoon. Morning plus 2.4, afternoon about minus 0.6. So that's a drastic difference. That's not like a 0.5 shot difference. That could sometimes due to be like the strength of the field. It could sometimes be due to like a small little storm that comes through when it's like a half a stroke difference. When it's over a 1.5 or a 3-stroke difference, like what we got for today, you're talking about a massive difference in conditions. And although we didn't have a forecast or actually a broadcast to watch the entire day, the forecast in the observed weather from Bermuda looks extremely flat from morning to afternoon. And although they did get some rain, maybe that softened up the course for the last few hours, it wasn't just like the later part of the PM wave that played easier. I was tracking it on my phone when I was on the golf course. It was the beginning of the PM wave that also played easier, and that was before that rain came through. So I think if that's your theory on why it played easier in the afternoon today, that's not necessarily 100% concrete. And although I'm not 100% sure it's going to be a 3-shot difference again, spoiler alert, the weather does look very similar from what we have for tomorrow. I think it's going to be at least a half a shot to maybe a stroke difference between the 2 waves. And who knows, maybe it is a 2 to a 3-stroke difference again. And showing you the forecast, let's see what we have for Friday. It also looks very consistent from side to side, maybe slightly higher winds in the first few hours of play. So kind of like what we had for Thursday, that same kind of trend could also rear its head. You can see the wind gusts are closer to 25 to 26 miles an hour as their first starting play. Your sustained winds are also 2 to 3 miles an hour higher than what we have in the afternoon. So that combined with the 3-shot difference in the first round has me only playing PM guys in my exposure for tomorrow. So if you guys are part of my Patreon page, you guys see my player pool, my projections as well are all heavily skewed towards that side of things. And I'm hoping it's 3 shots again. Obviously, I'm not counting on that because a 3-stroke difference is pretty wild. It's about as drastic as we ever see on the PGA Tour. But even if it's only half of what it was for today, I'm going to be pretty happy about that for my lineups for tomorrow. And let's go to our ownership up top next. That's what we're going to focus on, our top 10 highest owned plays to give you an idea where the game theory is, because a weather edge matters. That's part about squeezing out their ROI for any of these kind of slates. But you also have to make sure that you know where the rest of the field is going, because all of these fall series events have really weak fields. That's the case once again at the Bermuda Championship. But when we add bad weather on top of that, and it looks like that's going to be the case the entire week here, then you're going to ramp up that variance even more, because even some of your best shots end up getting punished. Sometimes you hit bad shots that end up being okay because of the kind of wind that you're playing in. There's going to be even more variance than what we typically have. And in a weak field like this, that's already ramped up compared to the regular season. So these guys like Cootie that are like 22% owned and Olison at the top end of the board, especially on the AM side of things, are going to be fades for me. I just don't want to take stands on these guys where you have to use them in 40 to 50% of your lineups to get that leverage, unless they're on the proper side of things. So a Cootie, for example, he's actually in my player pool for tomorrow because he is a high upside player. The number, I believe, 3 birdie maker on all the PGA Tour this year. So pretty impressive stuff from when we've seen Cootie on the PGA Tour, but you're going to have to eat the ownership to go out there and use them. So there are a few guys that are sneaking their way into my exposure, most notably some of the better PM wave players that we have in the field, like a Rico Hoey, for example. He's a high birdie percentage guy, also played pretty well at this course. A Kevin Yu, same thing. And Alex Smalley is somebody that I'll be using in some of my lineups. But the AM guys are automatic cross-off spots. And then even some of the PM guys that maybe aren't grading out as well for tomorrow, you might want to exclude from your exposure as well, because that game theory edge is the biggest that we have of all the major sports. There are other sports where they can be a little bit more predictable, like NBA, NFL at times can be rather predictable when it comes to the studs up top. That's not the case when it comes to PGA DFS. So even with some of these 9, 10K players, where on a main slate, I may actually play in some of my lineups because they've got 4 rounds to funnel themselves towards the top end of the board. I'm not as willing to play chalk on a showdown format up towards the top end of the board. It's not like I want to play chalk towards the middle to the bottom end of the board either. I pretty much avoid that no matter what kind of format I'm playing with PGA DFS. But especially when we're playing Showdown, I think you really want to embrace the low-owned guys, try and get as many of them into your lineups as possible. And if you have 1, maybe 2 of them that are showing up on this top 10 list, then I don't think you have to feel that guilty about it. But I would probably limit it to 2 at the most that I'd be using together. If you have a lineup that has like 4 of these guys in the same lineup together, then you're going to be really hard-pressed to find leverage in your last few spots. So that's why the ownership is so important to consider. It's not just the top 10 highest-owned players that you really have to watch out for, but when you get down to the 6 and the 7K range, a 7 to 8%er might not stand out that much towards the top. In fact, right, 7 to 8% isn't even cracking this top 10 of the ownership mark. But in the 6 and 7K range, an 8%er might be 20 times higher owned than somebody around him. Like literally might be that much higher owned because of the guys that are like 0.2 to 0.3% owned. Now that's a very drastic example of that, but we've got a lot of guys in the 6K range that are about 1% owned. So if somebody is 6 to 7% ownership down there, that's a 6 to 7x difference. That's like somebody being 5% owned at the top end of the board, and then the guy right next to them being 35% owned. So just because this is what we're focusing on for the live stream, don't think that you have to ignore it towards the bottom end of the board either. You're still going to have to think about it, in particular if you're using chalk towards the top end of the board. And for the rest of my GPP projections for tomorrow, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. There's a link in the description of this live stream to go out there and check it out. Golf DFS tier is how you get access to the spreadsheet. Not only has ownership for the entire field already posted for all my Patreon members, but my entire player pool, projected fantasy points, also a total model ranking for the week, giving an idea of how they fit this specific venue. And for the player pool, I not only tell you who I'm playing for tomorrow, but also the why behind it. So they're all PM players that I'm using in my player pool, but I'm looking for high upside guys, people that make a whole lot of birdies. That is the case for every single showdown slate that we play. I always want the highest birdie makers in my player pool. I'm also looking at course history players, so guys that have played well at Port Royal Golf Club in the past, and then also Bermuda grass putters. So just like the last couple weeks where we haven't had the shots gained metrics to use, that's going to be the case with this golf tournament as well. That doesn't mean that we have to just throw up our hands and play guys at random, right? We can still lean into some of the course fit metrics that make sense for this week. High birdie percentage guys should always be in the back burner for what you're looking for. But Bermuda grass putting, especially with the emphasis on putting at this golf tournament, I think it was like about 40% weighted in my modeling this week. It was the number 1 key stat other than approach play. Actually, I think it was number 1. It just eked out approach play actually in my weighting in my modeling this week. So why not look at it for our round 2 player pool? So for example, an Echevarria is a really good putter on that surface. I believe he's a AM wave though. So yeah, not somebody I'm personally going to be using. Same thing with the Whaley and a Matty Schmid. They're also really good on that Bermuda grass surface. So I guess if you were going to break the rule and you were going to play somebody on the harder side of things, maybe you do it with a stud like one of those guys. I'm personally not choosing to do so in my exposure. I'm also condensing my exposure down. I'm not going to be playing nearly as much for tomorrow as I normally would, just because of the kind of weather edge. I'm also just going to play higher dollar stuff. So I'm not going to have 150 lineups. I'll probably have closer to like 20 to maybe 30 lineups that I'm running, but I'm going to be running them with a higher average price, right? It's not just going to be the $5 GPP where I'm sprinkling in my 50 to 150 entries. It's going to be some single entries where I'm choosing to play, because when you have a weather edge like this, I'm not going to be the only one that plays it, especially because I mentioned it on a live stream like this. There are going to be other people that choose to play lineups in the same way. In the large field GPPs, it can be hard to get different on a slate like that, because you take a player pool of 120 players and you condense it down to 60. And then especially when you have guys like Cootie that makes sense on the PM wave that I plan on using, it just makes a little bit more sense for me to play in some single entries tomorrow, maybe some smaller field GPPs that are 2 to 3 maxes instead, so that I can maximize my potential, not worry about duplicating as much, and still have some of these chalkier guys in my lineup. So if you're playing in the GPPs, you might want to be a little bit more aggressive than I am and truly fade almost all the players that you're seeing here in the top 10, but that's dependent on the kind of contest you're entering. If you're in a cash lineup, I wouldn't worry about it whatsoever. Ownership should not even be a part of your process if you're playing in cash, but even in single entries, you can kind of throw that out there to the side. So again, find this spreadsheet with all of my player pool, all my projections over there on the Patreon page, like I said. And now let's go through some prop stuff. So see if we've got some comments down there. Kim saying, why is it playing easier in the AM? Honestly, couldn't tell you. They didn't show us the broadcast, so no one can really say. But based on the observed weather, it looks like the winds might have been higher. And then the temperature change. It was also a little bit warmer in the afternoon. So your guess is as good as mine, honestly. I don't think anyone knows for sure why it played easier. It would be different if we had the broadcast. I mean, if we had an ESPN Plus group to follow, we had an idea of what it looked like in the morning, I could give you an idea. The only thing I have from the PM wave was what I saw on my phone. We had a little screen in the side of our golf cart today where I was able to watch some of the golf. Also at the halfway house for about a half an hour, I was watching what they had on there. There was some rain that came through. Maybe that softened up the golf course as well, but we're just taking guesses at that point. So I don't think it's a 100% edge for tomorrow. It never is in DFS. The weathermen are not always correct, but a 3-shot difference is hard to overlook in my opinion. So that's the takeaway from today. He said, great read on the picks yesterday. Of course. Thank you for that. He said they really need to make shot tracker a requirement for these tournaments. Yeah, I feel you on that, Paul. It makes it harder to want to track. It makes it harder to do our in-depth research. As you guys know, we are typically doing here on these live streams. I feel you on that. And maybe at some point they will come around to give us shot tracker at these sort of events. But unfortunately, they don't. And everyone has to deal with it. So, hey, in DFS, in your large field GPPs, it doesn't really make a difference, right? Everyone's kind of dealing with the same stuff right now. So go out there and beat who you're playing against. But let's talk through some prop stuff. So I've got the Bermuda Championship stuff up here and also some DP World Tour averages. Obviously, the Bermuda Championship played extremely difficult as we expected. I thought it would play like 0.75 to +1. So it was right in that range. But to go back to the averages, it depends on when you played, right? Because in the afternoon, it played under par. The birdie average was closer to 4 per round, whereas in the morning, it was plus 2.4. And also the birdie average was like 2.5 per round. So it was very drastic depending on what side of the tee times that you played on. So when you're playing your props for tomorrow, you should probably keep that in mind as well, because if you were here for the weather forecast earlier, it does look like the winds might be a little bit stronger on the AM side, just like they were for today. And if the temperature difference, and look at this, it's a 2-degree difference. And today it was also like a 2-degree difference from the morning to the afternoon. I honestly don't know why it played super hard in the morning wave, but with a 3-shot difference, it's not something that we should ignore from the prop side either. So I'm personally going to be taking some fades in the morning wave and trying to leverage that for tomorrow. Maybe it's the temperatures, maybe it's the ball not rolling out as much. It could be any different combination of those different factors that we talked about. But bogey average is the same way. Bogey average was substantially higher in the morning wave than what it was in the afternoon. And even watching the short little broadcast that I was able to this afternoon, it looked super windy out there. I mean, it was nasty. The flag sticks were like bending over and whatnot. So it has me thinking that it's not really the winds that caused that scoring difference. It can't be the temperatures either, really, right? Because it was a 2-degree difference from the morning to the afternoon. I mean, that's not going to cause a 3-stroke difference in scoring. It had to have been the receptiveness of the course, maybe that rain that came through. But at the same time, the scoring average in the afternoon wave, and to go back to this from before, it was easier. It was playing under par before that rain came through. So again, it's a really confusing one for me. I've seen a lot of these slates before. I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years professionally, and this is as confusing as it gets from the weather standpoint. But I'm expecting the morning to play harder than the afternoon. And then on the DP World Tour side, it's the exact opposite, actually. So if we go to the DP World Tour averages, you'll see that the morning wave today did play a bit easier than the afternoon. And this is what happens in like 99% of scenarios. So for the DP World Tour side, it's not as big of a factor. It's only about a 0.4 shot difference from side to side. But still, if you have 2 even players, one's a morning wave guy, one's somebody that's going off a little bit later on the DP World Tour, assuming that their projections are the same, the more informed players are going off later. It's a 52-player field, so the guys that are in the top 5, top 10 are the ones that are teeing off later. So that does have me think that the difference for round number 2 probably won't be there like it was for today, just because the more informed and some of your better players are teeing off later. But conditions wise, because it was even across the board today, this tells us that it was easier in the morning. So you'll see with the slip that we're taking advantage of that weather difference. So it's going to be a combo slip between PGA and the DP World Tour. The PGA one is going to be a Kanaya under on birdies. I bet him this week. I bet him for top 5, top 10. He's one of my highest exposed plays in DFS. And even then, I'm still taking this under. If the average was 3.3 overall, it was closer to 2.5 in the morning wave. Kanaya, who's number 131 on tour in birdie or better percentage, has no right being at 4 birdies. He should be at 3.5, probably right about what the field average was. Being up at 4 gives us push equity if he gets to that sort of number. And although the entire field didn't finish, I think there's like 15 guys that still have to finish their rounds. Only 40 of the 120 players were able to make 4+ birdies. And that's only about 30% of the field. It'll probably go up with some of the guys that have to finish their last couple holes. I imagine there's going to be a couple guys that go from 3 to 4 birdies in that sample size in the morning tomorrow. But even if it goes to, let's say, 40% of the field that got to 4 birdies or better, that's only pushing that sort of number. And that's 40% of the field. That means that 60% of the time they're going under this sort of number. And then obviously with the hit rate, you add on top of the push rate on top of that. And he's only going over this and probably, and this is not even accounting for his projection, by the way. This is just looking at the field average. Guys are only going to make 5+ birdies using the round 1 stuff 20 to 25% of the time. I have to actually go back and check after play finishes tomorrow to get the exact number on it. But Kanaya, who is worse than average on the PGA Tour at making birdies or better on the harder side of things, or what we think is going to be the harder side of things tomorrow, is I think somebody that's a no-brainer fade. So I'm taking his under at 4 birdies. That's the PGA prop that I'm mixing in here. And then on the DP World Tour side, to go back to this average, it was about -2. Did play a little bit easier in the morning than the afternoon. Chris Ryan is somebody that over the last 6 months on the DP World Tour is averaging just over 1.1 shots gained per round. So if the scoring average is going to be about 70, it is a par 72. So that's what that -2 scoring average implies. He's on the morning side. He had a terrible round 1. That's not really a selling point on this prop. But the thing that's good about that is that he does have an earlier tee time now, which was when things were a little bit easier. It's when wins are going to be a little bit lower as well. Let me find Ju Mariah on here. Oh, I guess it went away. It's on my, there it is. This is close to the golf course right here. Let's get it to the 1 hour forecast so you can see all of Friday. Morning, you can see it looks pretty calm. It does kick up a little bit towards the very end of the day. But somebody like Ryan, that's one of the very first groups off, is going to have nutted conditions to go out there and attack. So if it's playing -2, which is about his projection, I love that under on him because he's got the better conditions. And then again, 6-month sample size. That's not a small sample. That's like close to 100 rounds that we're dealing with, or maybe not quite 100, but so over 50 rounds that we're dealing with on Chris Ryan here. Is gaining over a stroke per round on the DP World Tour. So we would think that he could at least tie that average, right? Have a field average day more often than not, with him going under more than that 50% of the time as well. So that's why I took that under on Ryan. And because we mixed in both different PGA events, we get a full 3x payout. And I was a bit tempted to maybe go to the PGA board and take like 2 unders on birdies. Hadwin's not one that I was really line shopping. I'm just clicking it to show you the difference in payout. It's only 2.5x though. So that's why when I was going through the Euro Golf board and I was able to find a piece of value that I thought made sense, it made it a good way to attack the board. So, you know, some unders on strokes for the DP World Tour, some unders on birdies for PGA, and we might be cooking out here for round number 2. But it's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support here on the channel as usual. I'll see if there's any last second questions to go through. But for all the extra content that I'm posting for tomorrow, you guys can find that on the Patreon. The DFS sheets over there with everything in terms of projections, my player pool, all of that completely covered. That's via the Golf DFS tier, only $15 for that. And then for everything I'm entering on Underdog and Prize Picks, because this slip that we entered here is not going to be the only one that I'm going with, or at least very likely. There was some other pieces of value that I was planning on getting to after we got off this live stream. You guys can find that on the Golf Prop tier. That's also $15 a month. Very reasonable for the kind of content and the kind of results that I bring to the table. And that's where you guys can tell everything that I'm going with for tomorrow. But that's all, guys. I appreciate you, as I was saying there before. And what do I think the cut line will be? Probably like +2 or +3. And you said your lineups are looking scary and not in a good way. I've got to say, I'm looking scary and in a very good way. So you need the bounce back. I'm hoping that things continue like they have for today. But hey, that's golf, right? Not everyone's going to be a winner in DFS every single week. I'm certainly not a winner every single week in DFS either. So hey, if that's the case, Phil, hopefully it goes better for you tomorrow, but I can't really empathize. And you said, Luke, you're the GOAT. Hey, I appreciate that. And you said, hey, you made $225. Those are the things I love to hear, Jose. But let's run it back tomorrow. Let's add on top of that. Hopefully, Phil can have a better day, I guess. Hopefully, we can continue to run hot like we have already to start this week. And let's have ourselves a round number 2.